The wind howled like a dying wolf across Red Ridge, 1883. A Comanche warrior, Quanah Red Elk, the terror of 3 cavalry troops, hung upside down, bound by fire ropes that burned flesh and pride alike, blood dripping for the waiting vultures. No one in Ridge Hollow believed he would see sunrise. Yet miles away, through the red dust and ice, a tiny figure in a black and white morning dress and an oversized brown vest watched with 8-year-old eyes that refused to look away. She tightened her father's old Stetson, whispered to her pony, and started riding straight into the storm. One child, one knife, one night that would change 2 nations forever. If a little girl wearing a cowboy hat too big for her head can cut through hatred itself, how far would you go to save a life? Drop your name and where you're listening from in the comments. Stay until the end. The wind still carries her name, and you need to hear why. Like, subscribe, and let's ride. The wind screamed across Red Ridge like a banshee carved from ice, tearing through the New Mexico night in 1883. It was the kind of cold that didn't just bite. It clawed, sank teeth into bone, and left men praying for death over another hour of it. High on the cliff's edge, where 2 lightning-scorched pines leaned like drunken sentinels, Quanah Red Elk hung upside down, a Comanche warrior who'd made cavalry captains piss their britches. His wrists, bound by ropes soaked in tobacco juice and chili powder, burned raw, each twist slicing flesh deeper. Blood trickled from his torn skin, dripping into the 200-foot chasm below, where Ken circled, their wings slicing moonlight into jagged shadows. Quanah's chest heaved, each breath a knife in his ribs. At 31, he'd faced death more times than most. Ambushes, bullets, the cholera that took his mother. But this was different. This wasn't a fight. This was a lynching, dressed up as justice by cowards too spineless to face him blade to blade. The ropes, fire ropes the settlers called them, weren't just meant to hold. They were tortured, the chili eating into his skin like a slow acid, the stench of tobacco mixing with blood and sweat. His long black hair, tied in a horsetail, swung heavily, matted with red dirt. A scar shaped as a hatchet blade gleamed on his bare chest under the moon, a memento from a soldier's bayonet he'd turned back on its owner. Ridge Hollow had done this. That miserable speck of a town, all clapboard shacks and dreams of gold, had turned on him. Caleb Dorsey, the snake-eyed sheriff with a vendetta carved deeper than the Rio Grande, led the charge. Quanah had been caught in a trap. Drugged whiskey, iron chains, a rifle butt to the skull. They didn't even bother with a trial. Just accusations of raiding and treachery. Lies were spun to justify stealing Comanche land for their mines. Now here he was, trussed like a hog, left for the vultures and the dawn. His lips, cracked and caked with dust, moved faintly. "Numunu Suku," he whispered, the Comanche words for the Great Spirit barely audible over the wind's howl. "If justice lives, show me." His voice broke, not from fear, but from the weight of betrayal. He'd fought for his people, kept the old ways alive when reservations tried to choke them out. And for what? To die like this, alone, while the town warmed their hands by fires and called it righteousness? The stars above glittered cold, indifferent. The moon, a chipped silver dollar, bathed the ridge in a glow that made the pines look like skeletons. Quanah's vision blurred, blood pooling in his head, the cold numbing his fingers to stumps. He thought of his sister, 5 years old, her tiny hands clutching a black and white rag dress, the last time he'd seen her. She'd been left behind in a raid, and he'd torn the plains apart to find her. Was she alive? Or had the whites taken Hiar too, another soul ground under their boots? A Ken screeched below, impatient. Quanah's eyes narrowed. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a corpse. He twisted against the ropes, muscles straining, ignoring the fire in his wrists. The fibers creaked but held, each movement costing him more blood. His strength was fading, the cold sinking deeper than the pain. He growled, a low animal sound, and went still. Not yet. Not like this. Then a sound, faint, almost lost in the wind's roar. A clink, like a pebble kicked loose. Quanah's eyes snapped open, scanning the darkness. The ridge was empty, just rock and shadow. But there it was again. A soft crunch, deliberate, not the stumble of some coyote. His heart kicked hard. Friend? Foe? Didn't matter. He'd face either with teeth bared. Across the valley, hidden in a cleft of red sandstone, a tiny figure crouched. Moonlight caught the brim of an oversized Stetson, tilting over eyes too sharp for a child. Beatrice McAllister, 8 years old, gripped her father's old spyglass, her knuckles white, her black and white morning dress fluttered, the brown leather vest, her daddy's last gift, hanging loose on her bony frame. Beside her, Whiskey, her shaggy pony, snorted softly. Bee's lips moved, a whisper to herself. "Hold on, mister. I'm coming." She didn't know Quanah's name, but she'd seen the ropes, the blood, the vultures, and she'd seen enough of Ridge Hollow's justice to know it was rotten to the core. The wind carried her words away, but not her resolve. She tucked the spyglass into her vest, patted Whiskey's flank, and started toward the ridge, a speck of defiance against a night built for death. Beatrice McAllister, 8 years old, didn't flinch as she slung her daddy's spyglass over her shoulder and urged Whiskey forward into the frozen dark. The wind tried to knock her flat, but she leaned low, her two big Stetson shielding eyes that burned with a fire no storm could snuff. Red Ridge loomed ahead, a jagged scar against the moon, and somewhere up there, a man was bleeding out for a crime he didn't commit. She'd seen enough of Ridge Hollow's lies to know the truth didn't matter to men like Caleb Dorsey, but it mattered to her. 3 weeks earlier, the New Mexico sun still had teeth, baking the arroyos dry and turning the sagebrush to brittle spikes. Bee lived on the edge of nowhere, in a half-collapsed shack 5 miles south of Ridge Hollow. The place was a skeleton of warped planks and rusted nails, all that remained after bandits gunned down her ma and pa 2 winters back. She wore her grief like armor, a black and white mourning dress patched at the knees, and her father's brown leather vest, its hem dragging in the dirt. The Stetson, her pa's pride, sat heavy on her head, tilting whenever she ran. Whiskey, her shaggy pony, was her only kin now, loyal as stone and twice as stubborn. Bee survived by her wits. She carved whistles from cedar to trade for flour, snared rabbits with twine traps, and scavenged coins from drunk miners' dropped pouches. Folks in town called her that McAllister rat, half pitying, half scorning the orphan who wouldn't beg. But Bee didn't care. She'd learned young that trust was a luxury, like the sugar cubes she fed Whiskey when no one was looking. That afternoon, she'd been prowling an arroyo for salvage, broken wagon spokes, maybe a lost spur, when a sound stopped her cold. Not the skitter of a lizard or the caw of a crow, but a child's sob, raw and ragged. Bee froze, hand on the folding knife in her vest pocket. Bandits? Trappers. She crept toward the noise, Whiskey's hooves muffled on the sandy wash. Behind a tangle of mesquite, she found her. A Comanche girl, no older than 5, curled in the dirt. Her black and white rag dress was torn, her face streaked with dust and fever sweat. A gash on her arm oozed, flies buzzing greedily. Bee's first thought was to run. Comanche meant trouble. Raids, blood, the stories men told over whiskey in the saloon. But the girl's eyes, wide and glassy, locked onto hers, and Bee saw her ma in them, the way she'd looked before the bullets took her. Damn it all, B muttered, kneeling. The girl flinched, whimpering in a tongue B didn't know. Easy, little one. Ain't gonna hurt ya. She cut strips from her own vest with the knife, boiled water over a quick fire, and cleaned the wound. The girl hissed, but didn't cry. B mashed cornmeal into a paste, fed her spoonfuls, and hummed a half-forgotten lullaby. Sleep, darlin'. The wind's got you now. Night fell, the stars sharp as spurs. B built a lean-to from branches, tucking the girl under her vest for warmth. She didn't know who'd left the child. Raiders, soldiers, or worse. But she knew fever could kill by dawn. At first light, the girl's fever broke, her breathing steady. B left her with a canteen and a cedar whistle carved on the spot, then rode hard for Ridge Hollow to find help. She didn't trust the town, but a Comanche kid alone was a death sentence. She led a trader back to the arroyo, but the girl was gone. Tracks showed hoofprints. Comanche riders, not boots. B's gut twisted. Had she saved the kid just to lose her? The trader spat, muttering about savages, but B saw the whistle lying in the dirt, its cord snapped. Someone had come for her. Someone who cared. Days later, whispers reached town. A Comanche war party had swept through, led by Quanah Red Elk, searching for a lost child. B didn't know his name then, but she felt a spark of relief. The girl was home. She kept the secret, knowing Ridge Hollow would twist it into treason. But secrets don't stay buried in a town built on greed. Caleb Dorsey's men were already sniffing for trouble, their eyes on Comanche land, rich with gold veins. When a drunk miner saw B near the arroyo, he spun a tale of her consorting with hostiles. Caleb pounced, his hatred for Comanche deeper than the mines he served. B heard the saloon talk, saw the glances sharpen. She wasn't just the McAllister rat anymore. She was a traitor. That night, as she sharpened her knife by the shack's dying fire, hoofbeats thundered. Caleb's posse dragged Quanah through town, chained and bloodied. B hid, watching from the shadows as they hauled him to Red Ridge. She didn't know why they'd caught him, but she knew a lie when she saw one, and she knew what those fire ropes meant. Now, as she rode Whiskey toward the ridge, the weight of her choice pressed hard. A girl, a knife, a pony, against a town's worth of hate. The wind howled, daring her to turn back. B spat into the dirt, adjusted her Stetson, and whispered to Whiskey, "We ain't cowards, are we?" The pony snorted, and they pressed on, into a night that would carve their names into the mountains. Whiskey's snort echoed in B's ears as she spurred him toward Red Ridge, the night swallowing her small frame like a minnow in a tar pit. Her Stetson flapped, too big for her head, but stubborn as her heart. She wasn't just chasing a man's life, she was chasing the truth, the kind Ridge Hollow buried under lies and gold fever. Below the ridge, the town's lanterns flickered, warm and false, while Quanah Red Elk bled out in the dark. B tightened her grip on the reins. She'd seen what they did to folks who didn't fit their mold, and she'd be damned if she'd let them win. In Ridge Hollow, truth was a currency nobody spent. 3 weeks back, the town had been a powder keg, itching for a spark. Caleb Dorsey, sheriff with eyes like a rattler's and a grudge to match, had been stoking fear since he pinned the badge to his chest. His brother's death, blamed on a Comanche raid, though old-timers whispered it was white outlaws and stolen moccasins, had turned Caleb into a man who saw enemies in every shadow. He wasn't just after justice, he wanted blood, land, and the gold veins running through Comanche territory. Quanah Red Elk, a warrior whose name alone sent miners scurrying, was the perfect scapegoat. The trouble started in the Rusty Spur Saloon, where Whiskey loosened tongues and sharpened knives. A miner, 3 sheets to the wind, swore he'd seen B. McAllister leading a Comanche girl near the arroyo. By sundown, the story had grown claws. B was a traitor, funneling secrets to Quanah's war party. Never mind that she was 8, an orphan scraping by on grit and cedar carvings. Never mind that the girl was a fevered child B had saved. Caleb seized the lie like a wolf on a lame calf. "That McAllister brat's in league with Red Elk," he growled to a crowd outside the jail, his voice carrying over the creak of wagon wheels. "And Red Elk's planning to burn us out." The townsfolk ate it up. Fear was their gospel, and Caleb was the preacher. They didn't need proof, just someone to blame for the lean winters and the Comanche shadows that haunted their dreams. B, the girl who'd carved toys for their kids, became a pariah overnight. Men spat when she passed. Women clutched their shawls and whispered, "Traitor." Quanah, meanwhile, was a ghost made flesh, his name a curse spat into campfires. When Caleb's posse tracked him down, lured by a cask of spiked whiskey at a trading post, they didn't bother with questions. Chains bit into Quanah's wrists, and a rifle stock cracked his skull before he could draw breath. By dusk, the town square was a circus of hate. Quanah, bloodied but unbowed, stood chained between 2 deputies, his eyes burning through the mob like a brand. Caleb paced, his spurs jangling like loose change. "This savage," he bellowed, "raided our wagons, killed our kin, and now he's got spies among us." The crowd roared, fists raised, though none dared meet Quanah's gaze. A woman shrieked, "Hang him!" Another yelled, "Not enough! Let the vultures have him!" Caleb grinned, all teeth and venom. Red Ridge'll judge him. Fire ropes and dawn. If he's innocent, his spirit'll walk. B watched from an alley, her knife clutched tight. She'd slipped into town to trade a rabbit pelt, only to find this. Her heart hammered, but her eyes stayed dry. She knew what fire ropes meant. Chili-soaked cords that burned skin to blisters. She'd seen them used once, on a horse thief who'd screamed till his voice gave out. Quanah didn't scream. He stood tall, a mountain against the mob's tide, and B felt a pang she couldn't name. He wasn't the monster they painted. She'd saved his sister. Maybe he was just a man fighting for his own. The posse dragged Quanah out, hooves kicking dust into the twilight. Torches lit the path to Red Ridge, their flames dancing like devils. Caleb led the way, his Colt gleaming at his hip. The crowd followed, a pack of wolves baying for blood. B tailed them, keeping to the shadows, her pony tethered behind a juniper. She heard the chants, the laughter, the sick thrill of men playing judge and jury. At the ridge, they bound Quanah with the fire ropes, hoisting him between the pines. His grunt of pain was the only sound he gave them. Caleb spat in the dirt. "Sunrise'll sort you, Red Elk. Ain't no Comanche outrunning Ken." As the mob shuffled back to their warm beds, B stayed, hidden in the rocks. The ridge was silent now, save for the wind and the faint drip of Quanah's blood. She didn't know how to save him, but she knew she'd try. And if you're out there, listening to this tale of courage against cruelty, hit that subscribe button. Let's keep these stories alive, just like B kept hope burning in a town that forgot how. The pony's hooves barely touched the frozen ground as B pushed whiskey up the last switchback, breath fogging white in the moonlight. Red Ridge rose above them like the spine of some dead giant, and at its crest, Quanah Red Elk still hung, a dark pendulum against the stars. Time was bleeding out with every drop from his wrists. B slid from the saddle, boots crunching on brittle pine needles. She tied whiskey to a stunted cedar, patted his neck once, "Steady, boy," then started climbing the pair of lightning-blasted pines that held the ropes. The trunks were slick with ice, bark sharp as broken glass. Her small hands found cracks no grown man would trust, and she went up like a squirrel with hell on its tail. Halfway, the wind slammed her sideways. The Stetson ripped free, tumbling into the void. She didn't look after it. Hair whipped across her face, stinging like nettles. But she kept moving. 20 feet up. 30. The first rope came into reach. Thick, tar black, stinking of chili and hate. She drew her father's folding knife, its blade no longer than her palm, and sawed. Fibers parted with a dry pop. 1 strand, 2. The rope jerked as Quanah's weight shifted. A low groan escaped him, half pain, half warning. "Hold still, mister," she hissed through clenched teeth, voice lost to the gale. "I ain't leaving you." She reached the second knot, arms burning, fingers numb. The knife slipped, slicing her own palm. Blood slicked the handle, but she clamped tighter and cut. Another pop. Then the whole line gave. Quanah dropped 6 feet before the remaining strands caught him short, swinging him hard against the cliff face. Rock scraped skin from his shoulder, but the sudden slack bought seconds. Bea didn't hesitate. She hooked her legs over a branch, hung upside down like a bat, and reached the final binding. The knife flashed once, twice, free. 300 pounds of warrior crashed downward. She heard the breath leave his lungs in a single grunt as he hit the narrow ledge below, rolled, and slid toward the edge. She dropped after him, landing cat-light on the balls of her feet. The ledge was barely wider than a wagon tongue, with a sheer drop on 3 sides. Quanah lay on his back, chest heaving, eyes rolled white. Blood poured from reopened wrists, black in the moonlight. His lips moved, no sound. Bea tore the brown vest from her shoulders and pressed it hard against the worst wrist. "Don't you quit on me," she growled, voice cracking like thin ice. "Your little sister's waitin'. She's got my whistle around her neck, remember?" She didn't know if he understood English, didn't care. Words were for people with time. Quanah's eyes focused, found the small, furious face inches from his own. Recognition flickered. He'd seen this child before, only once, through smoke and hoof dust, carrying his sister out of death's reach. Now she was here again, soaked in his blood and hers. With a sound like a dying bull, he forced himself to his knees. The world spun. Bea grabbed his belt, braced her boots against a rock, and hauled. Together they staggered into a narrow fissure the wind couldn't find. She dragged him deeper until the walls closed overhead, then collapsed beside him, panting for breath. She struck flint against the knife. Sparks caught dry moss in 3 tries. A tiny fire bloomed, throwing red shadows on stone. Quanah's skin was gray, lips blue, but the bleeding had slowed under her vest-turned bandage. She pulled a strip of jerky from her pocket and shoved it between his teeth. He chewed once, swallowed like it was gravel, then slumped. Bea sat back on her heels, knife still open in her bloody hand, and stared at the man she'd just stolen from the gallows tree. The fire crackled. Somewhere far below, a vulture screeched, cheated of its meal. Outside, the storm kept raging, but inside the crack in the mountain, a Comanche warrior and an 8-year-old girl shared the same small circle of heat. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say until sunrise, if sunrise came. The fire's last embers hissed in the mountain's fissure, casting Quanah's face in flickering red. Bea, knife still clutched in her blood-crusted hand, watched his chest rise and fall, slow but steady. Outside, the storm screamed, but in here, time held its breath. She'd cut him down, kept him alive, but dawn was coming, and with it, Caleb Dorsey's dogs. They had to move. Bea shook Quanah's shoulder, her small hand barely denting his bulk. "Mister, we ain't safe yet. Got a ride?" His eyes cracked open, dark as flint, and he nodded once, jaw tight. Pain carved lines across his face, but he forced himself upright, leaning against the stone. Bee doused the fire with a handful of dirt, grabbed her vest, now stiff with his blood, and led the way out. Whiskey waited, snorting clouds into the freezing air, his ears pricked for trouble. The trail down Red Ridge was a coyote's path, all loose shale and switchbacks that dropped into nothing. Quanah moved like a man half dead, one arm slung over Bee's shoulder, the other gripping a jut of rock. His weight nearly crushed her, but she braced her boots and kept them moving. The wind clawed at them, flinging ice shards that stung like buckshot. Bee's morning dress tore on a thorn bush, and her bare knees burned raw against the cold. Quanah's wounds seeped through the makeshift bandages, leaving a trail no tracker could miss. They reached Whiskey, and Bee helped Quanah haul himself onto the pony's back. The beast grunted under the load, but held. Bee climbed up in front, gripping the reins. "You know where your people are?" she asked, voice low. Quanah's breath rasped. High plateau, north, red rocks like teeth. His words were broken, but clear enough. Bee nodded, clicking her tongue. Whiskey started forward, picking a path through the dark. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains loomed, their peaks jagged against a sky turning gray with pre-dawn. Bee knew these trails. Her pa had taught her to read the land like a book, every gulch and game trail a sentence. But this was no rabbit hunt. Caleb's posse would be combing the ridge by first light, and a Comanche warrior was a prize worth killing a kid to claim. She kept Whiskey to the shadows, skirting open ground where moonlight could betray them. A mile out, Quanah slumped, his weight pulling them sideways. Bee yanked the reins, stopping short. "Hey!" she snapped, twisting to face him. "You stay awake, hear me? I didn't climb that damn tree for you to die on my pony." Quanah's lips twitched, almost a smile. Bossy, for a child. His voice was gravelly, but it had steel. He straightened, gripping Whiskey's mane. Bee snorted, turning back to the trail. "Ain't a child tonight." The air grew thinner as they climbed, the cold sinking deeper. Bee's fingers ached on the reins, her cut palm throbbing. She thought of her pa, his voice steady as he'd taught her to ride. "Fear's just wind, Bee. Let it blow through." She glanced at Quanah, his face etched with pain but unyielding. He wasn't her pa, but he was someone's brother, someone's fighter, and she'd be damned if she let him go to the vultures. They crossed a frozen creek, ice cracking under Whiskey's hooves. On the far bank, Quanah raised a hand, halting them, his head tilted, listening. Bee froze, ears straining. Then she heard it. Distant hoofbeats, maybe a mile back. Caleb's men, or worse. Quanah's hand closed on her shoulder, firm but not cruel. "Faster," he said. Bee didn't argue. She kicked Whiskey into a trot, the pony's breath steaming like a locomotive. The trail narrowed, hugging a cliff face. One misstep meant a long fall. Bee kept her eyes on the path, whispering to Whiskey, "You're the best damn pony in New Mexico, don't forget it." Quanah's hand steadied her once, when a rock slid loose, his strength flickering but enough. They rounded a bend, and there it was. A high plateau. Red rocks jutting like a wolf's jaw under the fading stars. Home for him. Quanah's grip tightened. "There," he rasped, pointing to a faint glow between the rocks. Campfires, hidden from the world below. Bee's heart leapt, but the hoofbeats behind were louder now, closing fast. She urged Whiskey onward, the pony's sides heaving. The plateau's edge was close, but so was the hunt. The hoofbeats behind them thundered closer, a drumbeat of death on the narrow trail. Bee's hands shook on Whiskey's reins, but she kept the pony steady, weaving through the red rock teeth of the plateau. Quanah's weight slumped against her back, his breath hot and ragged on her neck. The campfire's glow flickered ahead, a promise of sanctuary, if they could reach it. Dawn broke over the Sangre de Cristo, painting the peaks in blood and gold. Bee guided Whiskey into a hidden cleft, where the rocks parted like a broken jaw. The Comanche camp unfolded below, a cluster of buffalo hide teepees, smoke curling from low fires, and shadows moving with purpose. Bee's heart kicked hard. Safety, but not for her. A white girl in a Comanche camp was a spark in a powder keg. Quanah slid from the pony, landing on one knee. His hand gripped Bee's arm, steadying himself. "Stay close," he rasped, eyes scanning for his people. A cry split the air, a child's voice, high and sharp. A 5-year-old girl in a tattered black and white dress burst from a teepee, the cedar whistle Bee had carved bouncing on her chest. "Quanah!" she screamed, throwing herself at him. He caught her, wincing as her small arms squeezed his wounds, but his face softened, a crack in stone. The camp stirred. Warriors emerged, hands on knives, eyes narrowing at Bee. Women pulled children back, their whispers sharp as flint. Bee stood frozen, one hand on Whiskey's flank, the other clutching her bloody knife. She was an outsider here, a ghost in a mourning dress, and she knew what happened to ghosts who lingered. An old man stepped forward, his braids gray as ash, a buffalo horn staff thumping the ground, his eyes deep-set like desert pools locked on Bee. "Quanah Red Elk," he said, voice like dry leather. "You bring a white child to our hearth?" Quanah straightened, blood dripping from his wrist. "This is no child," he said. "She cut the fire ropes. She carried me from death. Her name is Beatrice, and she saved my sister." The girl clung to Quanah, staring at Bee with wide eyes. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The old man, Tsomi, the clan elder, raised his staff. "Speak, girl. Why risk your life for a Comanche?" Bay swallowed, her throat dust dry. "Didn't do it for Comanche," she said, voice small but steady. "Did it for her." She nodded at the girl. "And 'cause hanging a man for nothing ain't justice. It's murder." The words hung in the cold air, raw and unpolished. Tsomi's gaze didn't waver, but a shadow of respect crossed his face. Hoofbeats echoed from the trail. Caleb Dorsey's posse burst into the cleft. 6 riders with rifles drawn, faces twisted with greed and hate. Caleb dismounted, his spurs jangling. "Hand over the girl and the savage," he barked. "She's ours! He's dead by noon!" Quanah stepped forward, shoving Bee behind him. His sister clung to his leg, trembling. The warriors raised bows, arrows glinting. Bee's heart pounded. She'd seen bloodbaths start over less. But Tsomi raised a hand, silencing both sides. "No blood on this ground," he said. "Let the girl speak." Bee stepped out, legs shaking but chin high. "You call him savage?" She spat at Caleb. "You trussed him up like a hog, left him for vultures." "I cut him down 'cause I ain't like you. I don't kill for lies." Her voice cracked, but she kept on. "His sister's alive 'cause I helped her. What have you saved, Sheriff? 'Cept gold for your bosses?" A rider, a grizzled trapper who'd known Bee's paw, shifted in his saddle, eyes dropping. Another lowered his rifle. Caleb's face purpled. "You little traitor," he snarled, raising his gun. Quanah moved, but Bee was faster. She threw her knife, blade spinning, and it sank into Caleb's hand. He howled, dropping the weapon. Tsomi nodded. "The wind has spoken." He carved a wooden disc from his staff, etched with a flame and a gust, and pressed it into Bee's hand. "You are Kiana, she whom the Red Wind names. This camp is yours." The warriors lowered their bows. Caleb's men backed away, spooked by the elder's calm, and the arrows still knocked. Caleb stood alone, blood dripping from his hand. "This ain't over," he hissed, but his voice broke. He mounted and rode off, his posse trailing like whipped dogs. The camp exhaled. Years later, traders spoke of a white woman among the Comanche, her black and white dress traded for buckskin, leading ponies with a whistle carved from cedar. Kiana, they called her, the girl who'd faced a sheriff's gun with a child's knife and won. And when the red wind howled through Red Ridge, it carried her name, a promise that justice wasn't a rope or a bullet, but a hand reaching out in the dark. The red wind has quieted, but the story still echoes across these mountains. An 8-year-old girl in a too-big Stetson and a mourning dress cut through a century of hate with nothing but a pocket knife and a heart that refused to look away. Her name became Kiana, carried on the same gusts that once tried to bury a warrior alive. Now it's your turn. Drop a word in the comments. What hit you hardest? Would you have climbed that tree? Where are you listening from tonight? We ride more trails like this every week, until the next fire is lit and the next story rides in. Keep your powder dry and your heart open. See you on the ridge.